thank you very much for the introduction and for the warm words of welcome. And thank you also for giving us the chance to kick us off here with a conceptual input. Maybe just a word on the Berkhoff Foundation. We are very new to the DLOC network, at least, just joined recently. We are an organization that works in the field of conflict transformation, peace education, peace building around the globe. We have our 50th anniversary this year, so we've been around for some time, but the nexus between peace building and local governance or decentralization has come up more and more in the past years. So we are both working in projects where this topic matters, and yeah, that's why we're here today. And we'll start with the first look into local governance and what that actually means. Of course, most of you are aware. If we just go by the definition of it, it's formal and informal processes through which political and administrative decisions are taken and implemented at the local level. That's the basic idea. But very often this concept is kind of loaded with other meanings and assumptions that are behind it. So I just want to put them out there because they will help us to see what kind of assumptions actually lead to us thinking that local governance could support and sustain peace or not. So these other assumptions that I kind of want to pull out a bit are that very many organizations, and particularly development actors globally, think that local governance should be doing the governance because it is more transparent, accountable, efficient, it is closer to the people. So there's also this kind of concept behind it that this is kind of the right way to go. In many contexts, there's also the idea that local governance is a key to the peace building as state building approach. So that because local governance is connecting community level with government institutions and can address needs at the local level, that this is kind of supporting peace building and therefore also state building processes, particularly in conflict-prone contexts. And I think what is also closely connected to that, again, is an assumption that a bottom-up approach is the right way to go, so that community members, civil society, traditional local structures are really important to ensure peace and to ensure that there is an efficient governance in place. So I just wanted to outline these other assumptions that are kind of circling around the term local governance before we now go into the question in how far local governance is actually conducive to sustaining peace. And generally speaking, I think there are two different opposing answers to that question. I will start us off with the optimistic view on it, kind of outlining a theory of change of how we get from decentralization to more peace and stability. And you can see there's kind of two tracks. On the top, we look at the community level. And as I already alluded to, there is the idea that working with local structures empowers the communities on the ground, that it creates ownership of them and also incentives to cooperate more with local officials, so to interact, citizens interacting with the state, that this builds trust or rebuilds trust in case it was lost before into institutions, and that this trust in turn allows people to actually speak out about their needs, about their grievances, and share their concerns. And the theory continues that if these concerns are shared, there is also a receiving end. There are local officials who are now aware of the needs and the grievances, and that will be responsive to these needs. And that will improve, in general, service delivery. And if basic needs are met through services and grievances are addressed, then this will reduce the likeliness of people trying to find alternatives to get their basic services met by joining armed groups, by radicalizing, etc. So that is a very optimistic theory, which if we just looked at that would be maybe a bit naive. There's the other side of the coin that Jannel will present in a second. And I think the truth is somewhere in between, and she will share also examples from our Somalia work to show how we deal with these different ends. Over to you, Jannel.
Thank you, Katharina. Can everybody hear me? Thanks as well for the invitation to join you today. We're more than happy to be here and to speak a little bit about how we see the connection between local governance and peace building. As Katharina outlined, in an ideal world, working with local governance structures would lead to more responsive governments on the local level, and in general, more social cohesion, a happy population. However, that's not how it always works out. And this is the more pessimistic theory of change that we have in front of us. And it starts with the same premise, working with local governance structures. But potentially working with these local structures and coming in with programming and, of course, the money that brings in could also empower the local strongmen in the region. And people have influence and power in certain local areas for different reasons. And sometimes as externals, we don't really understand the dynamics of what makes somebody influential and powerful. And it could be that they're not powerful because they're legitimate, but they're powerful because they are from a group or a clan that's marginalizing other people, or for instance, very, very simply, they have the weapons. So obviously this reinforces predatory rent seeking and exploitation. So where the strong groups marginalize the weaker groups, oppress the weaker groups, and this clearly reinforces grievance and distrust in the state. So if there was mistrust to begin with, then there will be even less trust going forward. And what the outcome of this is actually one of the more interesting outcomes, and it strengthens the conviction of the population that their grievances can't be addressed within the system anyway, which leads them to look for other alternatives, or ends up in a system of hopelessness, and really expecting from the state any sort of services or justice or security. Another point is that working with local governance structures could potentially block central oversight and standards. So let's say you have a national or federal policy that should be implemented, and instead of helping implement that policy on the local level, you work directly with the local administrations, and that creates tension between federal and national level and the local level. And this could lead to a fragmentation of services in many, many different ways. That could then lead to the loss of economies of scale and coordination. So instead of coordinating all levels of the government, you're very focused on the local level, and you're missing out on these economies of scale, and it leads to potentially very damaging duplication, which would be unnecessary if you were coordinating properly. And of course, pork barrel politics, where whoever's in charge, whoever has the power, obviously has his pet projects that he would like to implement. And this clearly increases local grievance and desperation even. People are not trustful of the government in terms of providing services or really any sort of support that they need. And it also creates new opportunities for local state capture. So this provides opportunities for more strongmen or more people to come in and really control certain sectors of the state. And this locks in place the warlord and militia influence. And I think this can be seen in various contexts around the world. So yeah, overall, this is what we want to avoid. I think the question is, how do we figure out how to work towards a positive theory of change, optimistic theory of change, rather than this negative theory of change? And I'd like to just spend a few minutes, I only have 2 slides, that sort of gives a brief overview of some of the things that we're doing in Somalia. Very briefly, and welcome to the participant who said that he was joining from Somalia. It's great to see you, or meet you digitally. We have programming in Somalia. We've been there for about 7 years now. And for those who don't know, Somalia is a federal system. It's a federal form of government. However, the federalization process has been very stop and start. It has been successful in some respects, but very unsuccessful in others. And there is generally a lack of political will to implement this federal system, and a lot of tension between the federal level and the state level, and then as a consequence of that on the local level as well. So I think working with local governance structures in Somalia, we have a number of assumptions or premises. And one of them is that very often local governance on the district level in Somalia is about conflict management. So there are not a lot of services that are being provided at the local level. There is, however, a lot of local conflict, often based around resources or land, that the district authorities are being asked to resolve. So a lot of what goes on in district level governance is conflict management, and that's obviously very relevant to the work that we do with the Berko Foundation. Another premise is that a significant portion of local governance in Somalia is informal. So you have a very powerful khair system. It's the traditional form of governance in the form of the elders. And what's interesting about this governance system is that it is informal, but it's also very, very active, but at the same time, very controversial. So if you talk to women and youth, they are very open about the fact that this system doesn't really work for them. So there is not really a system of just governance in place when you're dealing with the elders. However, everybody says this is what they have. There's not really any alternatives to the khair system. So people are working within it. And I do have to say that it does have the ability to manage conflict. And I'll be very specific about the word manage. So what we have found, the assumption that we make, is that there's very little communication and consultation between these systems of government, between the local district authorities and the elders, and then the community at large. There's very little communication between this. So there's no way that the district authorities really understand what the needs of the communities are. And that's really where we come in with the work that we do. And this is my very last slide. One of the things that we do on a great scale is that we build and strengthen infrastructures for peace. For those people who are familiar with the term I4P, various types of formal and informal infrastructures for peace. But what we specifically do is we work with something called the Insider Peace Builders Network. And this is a large group of people. We have two separate networks, one in Hirshabelle State and one in Galvanek State. And it's a group of approximately 50 individuals from across the state level, from various groups and clans across the state. We have elders, religious leaders, youth leaders, women's leaders, journalists, professionals, teachers, you name it, they're part of our network. And these people are really embedded in their communities in different districts across these states. And they're very locally based. And we've been working with them over many, many years to build their capacity to become more active for peace. And this is a really important link, because we actively link them to the district level authorities in the communities that they work in. So for instance, we work in a place called Balad. It's not far from Mogadishu. It's a town in Hirshabelle State. And we work directly with the with the Balad district authorities there. And we're in constant communication with them about our project activities. And they also work with the IPN, so the Insider Peace Builders Network. And these individuals can take on various sort of conflict management, conflict resolution tasks together with the district authorities. And that's really the key, that we're linking these actors who are responsible or active in conflict resolution with each other in order to hopefully create a more inclusive I4P on a formal and informal level. And the second thing, or the third thing, is that we do a lot of community dialogues. So these are large-scale events for 6 days with 50 people. And we do these on a regular basis, where we bring the community members together to really discuss issues of conflict. I won't get into the various topics that we've dealt with over the years, but the district officials are very, very involved in these events, because we're inviting them in to essentially host this dialogue assembly. So they're providing this space for people to come together to the community. And we would not be able to provide this space without the support of the district authorities. And it obviously creates a sense of legitimacy on the part of the district authorities, because they're providing this space to their communities. And they're not staying the whole time, but through mechanisms that we've built into the projects, they're going to hear the voices of the people. So we write a lot of reports and have debriefings with them afterwards, so that the district officials are really aware of what the concerns are of the community. So essentially, we're trying to fill that gap between the district authorities and the community level. And I could honestly talk for another hour about this, but I'm going to stop right there. And again, thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.